It's a great privilege to be speaking at Casual Connect, and as usual, it's a great time in this industry. And the console industry for me has just been a big part of my life, and it's just been a big part of my experience. And I want to talk a little bit about, just for a couple minutes, I just want to share a little bit about my experience sort of in the console industry and just kind of some of my takeaways and what I learned. It's funny because I think about, in the console industry, I think about games like Red Dead Redemption, right? And of course the Halo series, and I played through these games, and I remember, spending 23, 24 hours getting through Red Dead Redemption and spending all this time, obviously with Halo, I love the game very much. And it was interesting because, I considered myself a core gamer. I was spending all this time and getting in front of the television and just really having a great time. And unless my friends were connected, the only way we were interacting with each other was kind of like leaving messages, and just, posting things for each other. And it was great fun. But at the same time, it was always like, okay, I want to kind of sometimes take it to that next level and what's possible out there, right? But when I think about console games in general, and I think about the impact of games, there's a writer I'm familiar with. His name is Tom Bissell, and he's an award-winning journalist, prize-winning journalist, and he's covered the industry quite a bit. And he put together a series of thoughts and wrote some articles that were really impactful for me, and I thought, this is really interesting and something we can kind of take away, because he really captured sort of the essence of like the core gamer. He had this great quote from an article he wrote in The Observer, and I'd like to read it. His quote was, what have games given me? Experiences. Not surrogate experiences, but actual experiences, many of which are as important to me as any real memories. Once, I wanted games to show me things I could not see in any other medium. Then I wanted games to tell me a story in a way no other medium can. Then I wanted games to redeem something absent in myself. Then I wanted a game experience that pointed not toward, but at something. And I thought, that's awesome. It's like, this is sort of the real definition of like what we would call the gamer, The one who's sort of like that dedicated to game, a dedicated gameplay pioneer who's willing to finish games, to play through, to let the experience kind of come in and absorb it, and who's willing to like grind through to get through these levels, right? So I started thinking a lot about, the gamer, and sort of like, how does that experience translate? How has that evolved? How has it changed? And but for a moment, it's like I want to talk a moment about like even the arcade when I'm thinking about the context of, gamers as we started, right? Because I remember going back to the arcades. I had great memories as a kid, playing in them and having a fantastic time. Spent a lot of great time. But what stands out for me the most when it comes to thinking about even arcades, it's like the times that I spent with my friends and the experience that I used to have. And I felt like, wow, this is a great way of spending time with friends and connecting and having a great experience. And it was that playing games with friends that was that notion when I thought about playing games was great, but playing games with friends was even greater. And that was the experience that kind of where I had this transition about a year ago. Our lives, they're completely immersed in technology. And, I still, I have less hours in the day like everybody else. And as time progressed and as, I got busier and realized I still wanted to have these gameplay experiences in my life, I found that with little or less disposable time, there was just, ways I was looking to continue my gameplay experience. And one of my good friends at Gearbox, for example, we were looking for ways to continue like playing chess with each other, because he's in Texas, I'm in Seattle, so it was kind of hard. He introduced me to chess with friends, and it was just like, wow, this is just fantastic. I couldn't believe it. Here I was playing chess with friends and just exchanging back and forth. We were having a great time, finding that I was playing on all hours of the night. It was just a blast. He sooner or later turned me on to Words with Friends, and then suddenly I'm playing 5 to 10 people, and now my iPhone pretty much is dying on a daily basis and having to just charge up. But just that experience of extending games, and I realized, for myself, it's like I didn't want to just spend like night after night after night, just completely immersed in the game. I wanted to have this experience, and I was finding that the relationships I was having with people that I wasn't necessarily in touch with all the time, those relationships were getting better, and I was having this great time, and that's where this transition sort of started happening for me. The experience was so impactful that I started looking at wow, what is it about, these games and my career? And I've built this amazing career in working on, core games and console games and PC games over a great period of time. but I felt like I really wanted to be part of something new and something really far-reaching and something that was inclusive of my family and my friends. And I found that playing games on the social level and on the casual level, it was amazing. I mean, that was the change, and that was sort of part of this crossover. So, you know, I know we're still in this great transition that's happening right now and the way people are playing games. You know, we used to talk about how we would transition to platforms in the console industry and how we'd go from one platform to the next and the challenges that are involved. But now it's like we're in this world where games are persistent all around us, and it's amazing that games are taking place, you know, on mobile devices and on PC, and we're connecting those experiences together. And that crossover is really what's having the change and what's having the impact in terms of how the direction of our industry and how it's going. Because now I realize, I used to think, you know, social games were different in a sense, but I'm realizing this has been like the continuation of my game experience and building games and being part of great gameplay teams. So the other transition for me was quickly learning, you know, how games in the social space are developed. And I think, you know, it's really interesting for me because I started looking at, you know, how do we build games, right? I assumed, you know, up front, the development of social games was really, you know, was going to be relatively simple because of you know, some console games. For example, on Halo 3, it was 3 years of long hours getting to the very finish line and just working, you know, intensively to get there, right? And so I thought, well, maybe working on casual games, it's going to be a lot easier. Nope. Can you guys still hear me? Okay. And I sort of, all my estimations were completely off because what I realized was that it was absolutely a dedicated effort and a tremendous effort working in creating casual and social games. And I found that it's absolutely this laser-focused experience that's really amazing and really rewarding on multiple levels. In fact, there was this big contrast between like when we were developing console games, like, you know, like I said, even for Halo's case, there was a multiplayer component, but getting that game to retail was the big march. That was the big effort. And the big discovery for me, obviously, or not obviously, but in building and developing casual and social games, getting to the launch, to the release is only the beginning. Only the beginning. And I never anticipated that. And that's been sort of like, wow, this is when the game really comes to life. This is really exciting. And the more dynamic I've had, you know, my career, the experience of being involved in social and building casual games has absolutely just been incredibly informative and incredibly stimulating and working with, like I said, very, very talented people. The games are amazing, and on the surface they seem so simple, but underneath these games are incredibly complex.
Using your mic, so use this one.
Okay, are incredibly complex. So what's the difference, you know, in how games in the social space are thought through, and, you know, how do we embrace the qualities of great casual entertainment? And so, in fact, I even asked myself this, you know, in this process of transitioning, I started asking myself, like, what is a casual gamer? Is it someone who plays just a few minutes a day, a specific type of game or content? What's the real difference between the classification between like a core gamer and a casual gamer? I had this great exchange with a senior engineer at Zynga named Costadas, and we were talking about his experience in Cityville. He was saying, hey, look, let's do some math. Assuming I've played 15 minutes a day for 365 days, I've played over 91 hours on Cityville, and that probably is only a low estimate, in fact. He said I'd contend I'd spend over 150 hours on that game, with weekends, 2 to 3 hours, and he said there's people that play Cityville 3 to 4 hours a day. So I started wondering, like, is the casual gamer the one who plays just a few minutes a day, but they could end up playing 3 to 4 hours a day? So suddenly this whole definition of like, well, what is the casual gamer, right? Because we both agreed that the casual game isn't really necessarily the right word. It's a better way to describe it as a game that fits into our lifestyle and as demanding as we want it to be. And I really love that definition. I thought, okay, this is the way we want to think about how we build content. The real challenge, you know, in building these games is that it should be great whether you play 10 minutes a week or 10 hours a day. And the best part of it is the games that we're developing in this industry, people that only play 10 minutes a day should be able to play with those who play 10 hours a day or 10 hours a week. It shouldn't matter. And also in building that shared game experience, right? The goal with our games is how do we build that permanent relationship with our audience where they can be devoted for a short period of time or a long period of time. And players find the reward playing our games adding to their lives and impacting their relationships in beneficial ways. And I thought, that is a great focus. And so we thought about creating sort of this social nexus. And if we can accomplish that, then we're able to create sort of this place where people can just go and hang out and play games. And that is why I love this industry. I think it's just amazing because I'm developing the content I want to play. We're focused on developing mechanics that are fun for us, fun to share with our friends and family, and it's constantly evolving and it's constantly changing from week to week, and we're always in a state where we can continuously improve on how we're connecting with our audiences, which I think is amazing. So how do we do this? So I thought I'd talk a little bit about sort of the process, like, you know, before coming to Zynga last year, I was working with Jerry Bruckheimer, and I learned a couple of great lessons that I thought I would like to share. And, you know, and the first was, he gave me this one great lesson, which I thought was, always focus on building great content. And of course, this is the guy behind Pirates of the Caribbean and CSI, right? But his point was, in his process, always focus on great content, and the audience will be there as well as the financing. And he said, design and build great content, and you will be able to sort of map out the technology that will map to that content. And the second lesson was simply stated, but not always simple to do, and that is surround yourself with great talent. And being the GM of Zynga Seattle, I've been very fortunate to be able to attract a great deal of talented people up here in the studio, and it's really awesome. This is just some of the places that they've worked, but it just gives you a profile of the level of talent that we have working locally, and it's been a real privilege to be working with them. So this is the production team that's behind Zynga Slingo, and the creative team behind a recent release, Ruby Blast, which we released just this past month. And it's cool because one of the dynamic aspects of working with Zynga as a global company is it gives us the ability to sort of develop games on a global basis. So we worked in partnership with our teams in Beijing in order to go through production, design, and actually working through going and taking the game live. So it was an amazing collaborative process across the world. So one more point about Zynga is, like, we spent a lot of time thinking about and working on concepts and gameplay mechanics, as I said, that we like to play. So in the process of working through, like, the concept stage, we'll spend time with our players, and we'll spend a lot of time testing out new ideas, which I think it's really rewarding. We have a great relationship with our audience, and I can't overstate the importance of that, about connecting with your audience and co-developing that process and developing content as your audience as a partner. You know, we obviously have great exposure to a lot of data, and the process of that data and looking at data is to sort of help, you know, share details and provide information on the surface that's not necessarily apparent. But the best part about data is that it can be informative, and it's always about our creative direction that we rely on to help sort of deliver the great gameplay experience and help sort of deliver on that promise to the player as well. So overall, I'm really proud of the work that we did on Ruby Blast. The game, if you give it a chance, I absolutely invite you to take a look and play it. It's this incredible gem thrill ride. It's got some spectacular visual effects that I'm very proud of. In my console days, we spent a great deal of looking at visual effects and impacting sort of day-to-day production and how that could be dramatic. I wanted to bring those high production skills to Zynga, and specifically with this first release, we're extremely proud of it, and I think you will enjoy it. But you know, the one thing about working on Ruby Blast that was really informative for me, and this is a big transition. So in console, we would think level to level, and how would we build a level, and how would the player's experience be improved sort of on this level to level basis, and at times we were looking at it, how to reward them in a great way. In Ruby Blast, and in these games we're building now, we're thinking about the moments. That's a big focus. Thinking about the moment-to-moment experience of your players and how they're enjoying your content and how they're enjoying your game. That was a big transition, so that's where a lot of our efforts go into, is thinking about those click-to-click, moment-to-moment experiences, and that's where we're finding the success that we're having with games like Ruby Blast. So again, about sketching concepts, as you saw previously, but it's like we would look at clarifying context is also an important part of what we're doing in games now that we're building here in Seattle. So we think about storytelling as something that's important. So we're introducing light narrative into our games, and we're letting players have some level of connection with that storytelling, and I'll show you a trailer in just a couple minutes. But the idea is that we introduce a narrative into our gameplay mechanics so that it's a way for people to have a great short 5-minute experience, and if they want to spend longer, they want to spend a greater deal of time going more in depth, that's a possibility as well. So by adding that storytelling, it adds that extra layer into the gameplay experience. So that narrative has helped us also in terms of guiding the content that we want to create and sort of direct as we add content and add features to our game down the road. And we have found that that narrative helps provide sort of this guide for us to kind of look at and to contribute to as we work. So the road for us, the road ahead for us is really about creating these great accessible games. Casual games are fantastic, and I've really learned a great deal about creating great casual content. I'm learning every day more and more about the impact of creating great social experiences in our casual games as well. Great gameplay mechanics and enhancing these gameplay mechanics with narrative and finding ways to share those experiences with friends and family. Ruby Blast is going to be one of the early examples of games that we've created to go cross-platform. In fact, we're extending that experience onto mobile and tablets later this year, as a matter of fact. It's truly going to be multi-platform. So following in the legacy of games like Zynga Poker and Words with Friends, Ruby Blast is going to extend its experience where people can carry their scores and connect those scores to leaderboards on the web so that experience really becomes a connected overall experience. So in closing, I want to make the point about the exciting road ahead for casual and for social games. I feel like we're just getting started, and we're just getting started at Zynga as well in this category. And with the expansions of games to mobile, and it's a great opportunity for us to bring play to new audiences, and for play to have a more meaningful and greater relevance in people's lives. Focusing on relevance in people's lives is the direction we're heading. And if you haven't seen it, though, I'd like to close with a look at the trailer that we created for Ruby Blast. Thanks very much.